oxygen. The oxygen molecules combine and they form ozone. This is how ozone is formed in the upper atmosphere. Next, why is the depletion of ozone layer a concern for us? UV light is extremely energetic. It is very dangerous. It causes skin cancer. It causes harmful mutations. It destroys plastic. It attacks rubber. It is bad news all around. So we don't want a lot of UV light getting to the lower atmosphere. We don't want it around us. The ozone layer is blocking the UV light coming from the sun. It is protecting the earth and the life forms on earth from the harmful UV rays. That is why when the ozone layer starts depleting, that is a cause of concern. We don't want the UV light coming down, and that is what will happen if the ozone layer is lost. So next question is, a silver article generally turns black when kept out in the open for a few days. But the blackened article, when rubbed with toothpaste, regains its shine, right? If you take a silver cup or a silver glass and you put out it in the open, you will notice that within a few weeks, the shine of that silver is gone. It turns an ugly shade of gray or black, right? The reason for this is that the silver is very reactive towards hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is a gas produced by decomposition of matter by human activity, and it is very, very corrosive to silver. When silver reacts with H2S, it is forming silver sulfide, and that is pure black in color. So that is the reason that the silver article is turning black. Name the black substance formed and its molecular formula. The black substance formed is silver sulfide. The formula is Ag2S. Why does it start shining when rubbed with toothpaste? Toothpaste contains many ingredients. One ingredient is a kind of peroxide. The purpose of the peroxide is to bleach your teeth, to give them that lovely white color. Peroxide also has another useful property. It will react with the silver sulfide and it will remove the sulfur. So the surface of the silver will become clean again. So it is the peroxide content in the toothpaste which is helping us to recover the shiny color of the silver article. Compare the following properties of ethanol and ethanoic acid. So ethanol is an alcohol. Ethanoic acid is a carboxylic acid. Ethanol contains the OH group, the hydroxyl group. And ethanoic acid is also called vinegar. It contains the carboxylic acid group, that is COOH. Now we are performing some tests which we can use to differentiate between them. The first one is the litmus test. So remember, alcohol is not an acidic material or an acidic chemical. So if you put a litmus paper into the alcohol, it will not change its color. On the other hand, if you take a blue litmus paper and put it in ethanoic acid, it is a weak acid, so it will turn the blue litmus red. Next, the sodium metal test. Now, this is the tricky part. If you were to add sodium metal to ethanol or ethanoic acid, you would notice that in both cases, there is a effervescence of hydrogen gas. So sodium will react violently with both ethanol and ethanoic acid, and you can't really tell the difference between the two. So we cannot use sodium metal test to differentiate between ethanol and ethanoic acid. We can use the litmus test because ethanol will not change the color of litmus, but ethanoic acid can. Next, the sodium bicarbonate test. This is also a useful test because ethanol does not really react with sodium bicarbonate, but ethanoic acid, that is vinegar, will readily react with sodium bicarbonate, producing a large amount of carbon dioxide gas. So in excuse me, this particular case, test A and test C can be used to differentiate between the ethanol and ethanoic acid, but we cannot use sodium metal test for this purpose because they both react in pretty much the same way. They generate the same gases also. Next question. The sudden withdrawal of the hand while touching a hot object shows the impulse is traveling at a very high speed, right? So if you accidentally touch a hot stove, your hand just jerks back. You don't have to think about it. It's very automatic. What is the phenomenon behind the sudden withdrawal of the hand? Explain the pathway of impulse transmission. So where does it start? Any kind of sudden movement that we perform in response to a stimulus is what we call a reflex action. So what we are describing here is actually a reflex action. So reflex actions are automatic. You don't have to think about it. They are deeply programmed into our brain. So what is the pathway for this? Any reflex action first requires some kind of stimulus. It can be pressure, it can be temperature, it can be physical touch. It requires some kind of stimulus. That is the first step. This stimulus then goes to a sensory neuron. What is a sensory neuron? A sensory neuron. A sensory neuron is a neuron that is designed to sense things. It can sense temperature, it can sense pressure, it can sense pain. It cannot send out any signals towards the environment. It can only accept signals from the environment. Now, the sensory neuron here is going to send this signal to the spinal cord. So this is the third step. It will go to the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a large bundle of nerve fibers. So the neuron will link into the spinal cord. Once it goes to the spinal cord will send out a signal using a specific neuron called the motor neuron. So the last step here for the reflex action to complete is the signal that is sent to the motor neuron. So a sensory neuron will accept sensory input. It will accept stimulus from the environment. A motor neuron will send a signal to a muscle, and in response to that signal, the muscle will contract, right? So that is how the entire loop takes place, right? We are sensing the high temperature. The signal goes to our spinal cord. From there, we send a signal using a motor neuron here, and that motor neuron will actually cause the muscle to move. So this is what is causing the muscle movement. This is the complete sequence by which reflexive actions will happen. Okay. Next question. Why? Just a moment. Okay. Next question. Why do the leaves of the Mimosa pudica droop when touched? So the Mimosa pudica is known by its common English name as touch me not. It is known by the local Hindi name as Lajwanti. The moment you touch the leaves of this plant, they will automatically and reflexively contract, right? They will just close up like a shy child. What is the reason for this? In the normal resting state, the leaves of this plant are turgid. The water pressure inside them is very high. So that pressure keeps the entire leaf open. The moment you are touching them, you are giving them a mechanical stimulus, it triggers a reaction which rapidly reduces the pressure of water inside the leaves. So the leaves are turgid initially, right? In the beginning, they are turgid, the pressure is high, the leaves are open. The moment the water pressure goes down, the leaves will close, they will become flaccid. So when the leaves become flaccid, they curl up onto each other, and that is why the leaves will shrink when the leaves are touched for the Mimosa pudica or touch me not. The second question, what are the different types of movements seen in plants? We can divide the movement in plants into two broad categories. So let's look at this. So what are the movements seen in plants? Two broad categories. We have trophic movements. These are trophic movements. And we have nastic movements. So we have trophic movements and we have nastic movements. These are the two broad categories of movement you will find in plants. Trophic movements do not require any contact. They do not require contact. That is one important property. Second, they have a definite direction. These movements will always happen in some definite direction. Nastic movements have contact required. Mechanical contact is the most common type. So this is nastic movement. Second, they are not very directional. These movements are not taking place in any particular direction. These are the two broad categories of movement in plants. So if you talk about trophic movement, we have geotropism. Roots are geotrophic, right? They move towards gravity. On the other hand, shoots are negatively geotropic. They are traveling in the upward direction. They are traveling away from gravity. Roots are also hydrotropic. They are going in the direction of water. So we have different stimuli for which different kinds of movements happen, and they're happening in a particular direction, right? Roots are moving towards gravity or towards water. Shoots are moving towards sunlight, phototropism, or they are moving away from gravity. So there's a definite direction. So these are trophic movements. You don't require contact for them. The sun is not in touch with the plant, right? On the other hand, nastic movements require contact. So Mimosa pudica, when you touch it, it shuts down. That is an example of nastic movement. You require physical contact for this movement to happen. Now, how is the movement shown by roots different from those of shoots? So to build upon what we have just learned, we just learned that plants show trophic movements. So roots are hydrotropic. They are traveling towards water. They will try to seek out water. They are also geotropic. They are traveling in the direction of gravity. They are traveling towards gravity. On the other hand, the shoots are phototropic. If you put a plant in a window over several weeks, you will notice the plant is bending towards the sunlight, right? It is trying to seek out the light source. So they are positively phototropic. Shoots are also negatively geotropic, right? Roots are positively geotropic. Shoots are negatively geotropic. They are traveling away from gravity. Okay. Moving on. Now we have an object is kept at a distance of 20 centimeters from a convex lens whose radius of curvature is 40 centimeters. So they have told us that we are dealing with a convex lens. So remember, a convex lens is convergent in nature, right? It is gathering light and focusing it onto a single point. And the radius of curvature of this lens, that is R, is equal to, according to the question, 40 centimeters. Now remember, the focal length of a lens is half of its radius of curvature. So F is equal to R by 2. So in this case, that is 20 centimeters. The focal length for this particular lens will be 20 centimeters. And the object is kept at a distance of 20 centimeters from the convex lens. So if you were to draw this, if you were to form a ray diagram for this, let's see. Here we have our lens. So this is a convex lens. It is bulging outward on both sides. So this is the principal axis on which we make all the measurements. So from here, we have, this is the point of focus. This is the focal length. This distance is the focal length. So they have said the object is at a distance of 20 centimeters from the convex lens. So this object is placed, let's try a different color. So here, this is where the object is placed. This is our object exactly at the focal length, that is 20 centimeters. So what will happen is, if we were to consider this to be a point object, let's say that this is a point object. Just a moment. So if we were dealing with a point object here, it would be sending out rays. Because this object is at the focus, we will notice that all these rays, after traveling through the lens, are parallel to each other. All of these are parallel to each other. And you may remember this from geometry. We know that parallel rays will meet at infinity. So in this particular case, if the object is placed at the focus of this lens, this convex lens, we notice that all the emerging rays after refraction are traveling parallel to each other. So they will meet at infinity. We know that the definition for an image is the imaginary or real point where the rays are meeting after reflection or refraction. So in this case, the question is, what will be the location of the image? For this particular case, the location will be infinity because the object is being placed at the focus of this lens. The next question, can the image be obtained on a screen? Yes, if you place a physical screen here, if you place a physical screen here, you will get an image on the screen. So this will be a real image. It is obtainable on a screen. List any two common applications of a convex lens. Remember, whenever you are trying to concentrate light to increase brightness, you have to use a convex lens. So you can use a convex lens for gathering sunlight to produce high temperature. That is the principle of a solar furnace. You can use a convex lens to magnify an image. It is used in microscopes and telescopes, etc. You can also use a convex lens if you look at this particular diagram. If you have a light source which is spreading into all directions and you want the beam to be parallel when coming out of the device, you can use a convex lens for that. So those laser pointers that you use at home, right? They use a convex lens to get a narrowly focused beam which can travel a large distance without dispersing. So these are the possible applications for a convex lens. Let's clear this and let's move on. A red LED bulb is placed at a distance of 30 centimeters from a mirror and forms an image on a screen at the same distance of 30 centimeters from the mirror. So we have a mirror. If you place the object 30 centimeters away from the mirror, the image is also formed at the exact same location. So the position of the object and the position of the image are the same. The question is, what is the nature of this mirror? So if you have studied mirrors extensively, if you have memorized all the different positions of the mirror, you will remember that if you take a concave mirror, and you place the object at its center of curvature, you will get an image exactly at the center of curvature, which is exactly what they are describing here. They have placed an object at a distance such that the image is also produced exactly at that same distance from the mirror. So clearly they are using a concave mirror. They are using a concave mirror. So this will be the answer for the first question. What is the focal length of this mirror? As we have with lenses, if you have the radius of curvature, you can divide that by 2 and find the focal length. In this case, this will be the radius of curvature that we learned from the first part. So the focal length will be half radius of curvature, that is 30 centimeters divided by 2, that will be 15 centimeters. So this will be 15 centimeters. If the height of the bulb is 2.4 centimeters, find the height of the image. In a concave mirror, if you have placed the object at the center of curvature, which is the case here, the image is also formed at the center of curvature and it is exactly the same size as the object. So the image is not diminished, it is not smaller than the object, the image is not magnified, it is not bigger than the object. The image and the object are the exact same size. In this case, the height of the bulb is 2.4 centimeters, which means that the image will also be having a height of 2.4 centimeters with one important difference. State whether the image formed is erect or inverted. In this particular case, the real image you obtain on a screen will be inverted. So if this is the LED, the image will be looking like this. It will be a real image which is upside down, which is inverted. So this will be an inverted image. The height of the image will be 2.4 centimeters and the focal length of this concave mirror will be 15 centimeters. Okay, moving on. What is meant by an electrical fuse? How does it work in a circuit? What else can be used in its place? So first and foremost, an electrical fuse is a safety device. This is the first keyword you have to put into your answer. It is a safety device. It is made of an alloy of lead and tin. It is simply a wire that is made from an alloy of lead and tin and has a low melting point. Now, how does it work in a circuit? So let's say that a person is very stupid. He has connected a lot of appliances at the same time together to a power source, and they are drawing a large amount of current from that power source. And the copper wiring in the house was not designed to handle this much current. So it is getting really, really hot. Now, copper has a fairly high melting point. So the problem is that it will keep getting hot. It will burn through the insulation. It will easily start a fire. So to prevent that from happening, what happens? If this person has installed a fuse in his house, the fuse has a low melting point. So before the current can reach a dangerous level where a fire can start, the fuse will simply melt and it will completely break the circuit. Once the circuit is broken, there is no current and there is no risk of fire. So it is a safety device. The fuse is a safety device made from lead and tin of low melting point. It works by melting the circuit and breaking the circuit when the current exceeds a safe value. Now, what else can we use in its place, right? So in modern houses, you often will not see a fuse box, right? In older houses, in my childhood, we had fuse boxes in the house. So if the fuse blew out, you remove the fuse, put in a new wire, put it back. It takes time. It is very inconvenient. Now we have something called an MCB. Now we have something called an MCB, which stands for miniature circuit breaker. So a miniature circuit breaker is like a switch. It is designed to trip. It will shut down if the current exceeds a safe value. The good thing about this, the advantage here is that if the circuit trips, if the MCB trips, you check out what the problem is, you repair the issue, and then you just turn the MCB back on. So it is much more convenient than using an electrical fuse. Explain what the effect on the magnetic field of a solenoid will be if, number A, option A, the number of turns is increased. Option B, the current in the solenoid is reversed. Option C, the current in the solenoid is decreased. Fine. So what is a solenoid? A solenoid is a coil of wire. It is also called a helix, H-E-L-I-X. How do you form this? So what you will have is you have a cylindrical surface. This is a cylinder, and around the surface, you will wrap continuous turns of wire. So this cylindrical coil is what you will call a solenoid. This is what we call a solenoid. So when you send current in a solenoid, you get a strong magnetic field from this solenoid along the axis, along the length of the solenoid. So what have they asked? What will happen to the magnetic field in a solenoid if the number of turns is increased? If the number of turns is increased, you will get a stronger, more powerful magnetic field. So increasing the number of turns in a solenoid will increase the magnetic strength or the strength of the magnetic field of the solenoid if the current remains the same. Next, the current in the solenoid is reversed. If the current in the solenoid is reversed, remember, if this is our solenoid, let's say here is our solenoid, and for a given current, let's say that this is the polarity. So you will have a north pole and you will have a south pole. If you reverse the direction of the current, what will happen is these poles will interchange. They will reverse places. So north becomes south, south becomes north. So if the current in the solenoid is reversed, what will happen? The polarity of the magnetic field will also reverse. The poles will also reverse their positions. What happens if the current in the solenoid is decreased? If you decrease the current going into the solenoid, the strength of the magnetic field will also go down. If you increase current, you get more magnetic field. If you decrease current, you get less magnetic field. So a very straightforward question. Just keep your concepts clear and you will be fine. Moving on. How is the food chain different from a food web? What is the 10% rule and how does it affect the energy moving up the trophic levels? So what is a food chain? If you are dealing with a single sequence in which one organism is eating another organism, right? Let's try a simple sequence. Let's say that we have plankton. We have plankton. The plankton is eaten by, let's say, shrimp. The shrimp is eaten by, let's say, tuna fish. The tuna fish is eaten by a shark. And the shark is eaten by a whale. What we have here is a food chain. So you are noticing that there is a single sequence in which organisms are being eaten or they are eating other organisms. So the whale is at the top of the food chain, while the plankton and shrimp are at the bottom of the food chain. On the other hand, a food web is a very complex interaction between all of these organisms. So let's say the whale gets old and dies. Once it gets old and dies, it will be eaten by the sharks. It will be eaten by the tuna. As it decomposes, the nutrients will also be helping the plankton to grow. They'll be eaten by shrimp. So in the real world, you don't have these neat, tidy sequences in which only one animal is eating another animal. All these creatures are interconnected. They are all getting energy from each other. They are all getting food from each other. So in the real world, we are not dealing with food chains. We are dealing with food webs. You can also say that combining different food chains together in an environment will create a food web. The next question that they have asked here is, what is the 10% rule and how does it affect the energy moving up the trophic levels? So we know that the trophic levels work something like this. So we have a lower level of producers. We have the next level of primary consumers. Then we have secondary consumers. And we have tertiary consumers. Right? So you can say, for example, if you have producers here, like grass, algae, plants, these are the producers. They are getting energy from the sun and they are storing it up. And then other animals, primary consumers like cattle, goats, sheep, etc., are eating the grass. They are primary consumers. Then come the secondary consumers, humans, lions, cats, dogs, all of them are feeding on this meat and so on. What the 10% rule says is that whatever energy exists at the primary level, only 10% of this energy will be transferred to the next trophic level. So if we are starting with, let's say, 1000 joules, the producers have 1000 joules of energy. Only 10% or 100 joules ends up at the second trophic level. Only 10 joules ends up at the third trophic level, which means that the amount of energy available in an ecosystem goes down drastically as you go from the lowest trophic levels to the highest trophic levels. This is why if you look at any ecosystem, the number of producers is much greater than the number of primary consumers. Like you will have 10 hectares of grassland supporting 100 cows. But for every 100 cows, you will have only one lion because only 10% of the energy from the cows is actually usable for the lion. So as you go up, the amount of effective energy in the trophic level will decrease. Only 10% will reach to the next level. Moving on. What is the IUPAC name for the following compounds? So the very first compound here is a carboxylic acid. So we notice that it contains the COOH group. So this is an acid. It contains 3 carbon atoms, 1, 2, 3. So that is prop. So this is propanoic acid. In the second case, the functional group is CHO. That is the aldehyde group. So we will use the al suffix here. And we have the compound being CH3CHO. So we have 2 carbon atoms here. So this is ethanal. This compound will be called ethanal. Then we have an alkene. In this alkene, we can count from 2 sides, right? We can count from my right, that is 1, 2, 3. So from this side, the double bond is at the 3rd carbon atom. If I count from this side, if I count from my left side, I get 1, 2. So in this case, the double bond is at the 2nd carbon atom. So according to the IUPAC system, we will give primacy to the least number possible. So least number possible here is 2. So this is a alkene with the double bond at the 2nd carbon position. Total carbons are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is pent-2-ene. This hydrocarbon will be pent-2-ene. Again, in this case, we have 3 carbon atoms, C, 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 3 carbon atoms. So that is prop. At the second position from both sides, it doesn't matter if I go from right or left, it is the second carbon atom which contains I. So I can say that this is 2-iodopropane. The last one is CH3, CH2, CHOH, CH3. So in this case, what we are having is from this side 1, 2, 3, and from this side 1 and 2. So again, we give the smaller number more prominence. We have how many here? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 carbon atoms, that is butan-2-ol. So this is an alcohol with the functional group on the second carbon atom. These are the names for these compounds. Okay, what is the optional question? A carbon compound on being heated with excess H2SO4, sulfuric acid, forms another carbon compound Q, which on addition of hydrogen in the presence of a nickel catalyst forms a saturated carbon compound R. 1 molecule of R on combustion is giving us 2 molecules of carbon dioxide and 3 molecules of water. Identify P, Q, and R and write the chemical equations for the reactions involved. Now, this question will appear tough in the beginning when you are tackling it, but the critical thing to realize for questions like this is there is always one compound in this question which is pretty easy to figure out. For example, you will notice 1 molecule of R on combustion is forming 2 molecules of carbon dioxide and 3 molecules of water. Immediately you get a clue. If on complete combustion you are getting only 2 carbon dioxide molecules, that means that the original compound contains only 2 carbon atoms. So that is a big clue there, that you're getting 2 carbon atoms. How did you get this molecule? How did we get R? We got R by the addition of hydrogen in the presence of nickel catalyst. When you heat a chemical like an alkene in the presence of nickel catalyst and hydrogen, we have the process called hydrogenation. Any triple bond or double bond, any unsaturated carbon bond in the presence of nickel catalyst and hydrogen will become a single bond. It will become saturated. So what we have here is, we have a compound which in saturated state, when it is an alkane, contains 2 carbon atoms, which means it is ethane. Compound R has to be ethane. And compound R was created by the hydrogenation of a different compound named Q. So if you were to take ethene, right, that's an alkene, and if you hydrogenate it, you get ethane. So if R is ethane, then clearly Q has to be ethene. It's a alkene. And you can create ethene by the action of a chemical like ethanol reacting with concentrated H2SO4. So you can guess that P is something like ethanol. On being treated with excess H2SO4, it was giving you ethene, that is an unsaturated carbon compound. When ethene was hydrogenated in the presence of nickel catalyst, all the double bonds were gone. You have only single bonds. So ethene turns into ethane. When ethane is reacted with oxygen, you are getting C2H6 reacted with oxygen is giving you 2 molecules of CO2 and 3 molecules of H2O. So you are getting 2 carbon atoms and you're getting 6 hydrogen atoms, and that will help you confirm that all the identities you have found are the correct ones. Okay. Next question, why is the cleansing action of detergents considered more effective than soaps? If you are using soaps in soft water, no problem, right? You get plenty of foam, you get good cleaning action, you're happy. If you have water containing a large amount of dissolved magnesium and calcium salts, they will react with the soap to produce scum. Scum has no cleansing action. It is sticky. It will stick to your clothes. It will make cleaning much, much harder. You are simply not getting any lather. You're just getting disgusting scum. On the other hand, detergents do not have this problem. They can work perfectly well even if you are dealing with hard water. That is why detergents are better at cleaning action compared to soaps. Next question. Fission or budding is not considered a mode of sexual reproduction. Why? In the case of fission and budding, you simply have a parent cell or a parent organism which is giving rise to daughter cells without any need of fertilization. There is no combination of male and female gametes here. There is no combination. So you just have a parent organism. It is breaking up into daughter organisms. That is why it is considered an asexual mode. There is no combination of sexual gametes involved here. That is why it's considered asexual reproduction. What is the fertilization and what are the products formed after fertilization in flowering plants? So the process in which male and female gametes combine to produce a zygote, that is a fertilized embryo, that process is what we call fertilization. Now, what happens? What are the products when fertilization happens? When fertilization happens, the male gametes are combining with two kinds of female gametes. So you will have polar nuclei inside the female gametes, which are combining with the male gamete to form the endosperm. The endosperm acts as the food reserve for the embryo. Another gamete, female gamete, will combine with the actual embryo to produce the zygote. So you don't have one fertilization event happening here. There are many fertilization events which are producing different things. One is producing the zygote, which will actually turn into the plumule and the shoot, and all of that will happen. And the other fertilization is taking place with the polar nuclei that produces the cotyledons. It produces the endosperm, which is actually supplying food to the developing zygote. Next, a flower is unisexual, which means that in this particular plant, you have either male flowers or you have female flowers. You don't have both genders or both sexes on the same plant. It is small and produces numerous dry pollen. Which type of pollination can be seen in this plant? This plant cannot self-pollinate. This plant will not be able to self-pollinate. Why? Self-pollination can only happen if the same plant contains both the male and female flower parts. Only then can self-pollination take place. So in this particular case, this plant will always be cross-pollinated. So if it is a male flower, it will be sending pollen to a female flower. If it is a female flower, it will accept pollen from a male flower. So there will only be cross-pollination in this case. There will not be any self-pollination in this case. Now, what is the agent for pollination in this case? The most likely agent in this case is because the pollen is large in amount and it is dry. So it can be carried by the wind very easily. It is very light. So the most likely pollination agent for this particular plant is likely to be wind. Next question, where does fertilization take place in humans? Is it internal or external process? The fertilization in humans take place in the fallopian tubes. It is taking place inside the female, so it is an internal process. If you are looking at frogs and fish, in that case, the eggs are laid in water, the sperm is laid in water, they combine outside the body and fertilize. That is external fertilization. For humans, it is internal fertilization inside the body. Option B, what happens to an egg if it is not fertilized? So humans have a menstrual cycle in females. If the egg is not fertilized, what will happen? After a preset amount of time, approximately 27 days, the entire ovum along with the endometrial lining, the inner lining of the uterus, will be dissolved and expelled out of the body. And the next fertilization, the next implantation will take place after that, if the egg is not fertilized in that time. How is the uterus and placenta helpful in providing the best suitable environment for the growing fetus? Now, the uterus and placenta are two different structures with two different functions. The uterus contains thick connective tissue. It is shock absorbing. It protects the developing embryo and fetus from any physical shock, from any temperature changes. It provides a very stable, benign environment, a very safe environment in which the embryo can develop. The placenta is a structure that is enclosing this developing fetus. It also has the function of sending oxygen and vital nutrients from the mother to the offspring. So the placenta has a protective function and it also supplies nutrition. The uterus has a protective function for the fetus. Next question. Establish a relationship to determine the equivalent resistance of R for a combination of four resistances, R1, R2, R3, and R4, connected in series. Calculate the equivalent resistance of the combination of three resistors, each of which are 3, 6, and 12 ohms and are connected in parallel. Let's tackle the first part of this question. So let us say that we have a circuit. So this is our circuit. Let's say this is the voltage. This is the source voltage, Vs. we have these resistances R1, R2, R3, and so on till R4. And remember, all of these resistances are in series, which means that there is only one current flowing in this circuit. There is only one path for current to flow. So the same current, not equal current, the same current is flowing through all these resistances. Also remember, when you are placing resistances in series, the current in all the resistances remains the same, but the voltage is dropped across each resistance. So the voltage supplied by the cell or battery gets divided among these resistances. Each of them has its own voltage drop. So we have 4 resistances here. This will be V1, this will be V2, V3, and so on till V4. And we can also say for this particular case that Vs is equal to V1 plus V2 plus V3 and so on till V4. This can extend to any number of resistances. So if you have 20 resistances, just say V1, V2, V3 all the way to V20. So the number doesn't really matter. Just keep track of how many resistances there are. Now, we can say that there is a current I traveling in this entire arrangement, and that current multiplied by the equivalent resistance. The current in the circuit multiplied by the equivalent resistance of the circuit is equal to Vs. This is equal to V1 is I1 R1 plus I2 R2 and so on, right? So I3 R3, I4 R4 and so on. So we can say, I'll erase this now. Since Vs is equal to V1 plus V2 and so on, we can say that I times R equivalent is equal to I1 R1. This is the potential drop across resistor R1 plus I2 R2 and so on. Both sides, I is equal to I1 equal to I2 equal to I3 and so on. Why? Because the currents are all the same. This is a series network, so all of them are carrying the same current. So I can say that I times R equivalent is equal to I bracket R1 plus R2, R3 and so on. Cancel these out. You get R equivalent is equal to the sum of R1, R2, R3 and so on. So in this particular case, if the resistances are all in series, we simply add up the individual resistances. That gives us the total resistance. Moving on, what is the other question? We have 3 resistances, 3, 6 and 12, which are all connected in parallel. So we have R1, R2, R3. And you will notice that their ends are shorted together. Remember, whenever you are talking about resistances in parallel, their ends will be shorted together. The ends will all be combined together. So in this particular case, the equivalent resistance of this arrangement, if I were to take out this network and put a single resistor there, that resistance will be having a value R equivalent, 1 upon R equivalent, equal to 1 upon R1 plus 1 upon R2 plus 1 upon R3. So in this case, 1 upon R equivalent is equal to, what are the resistances here? We have 3, 6 and 12 ohms. So this will be 1 upon 3 plus 1 upon 6 plus 1 upon 12. If you take the LCM, what are you getting? So the LCM is 12. This is 4 plus 2. Just a second. Four plus 2 plus 1. That is equal to 7 by 12. That is equal to 7 by 12. And is this our equivalent resistance? No. Many children again and again make this mistake. They will get to this point and they will leave the question thinking that they have found the value. No, this is not equivalent resistance because this is simply 1 upon Req. That is equal to 7 by 12. So you again have to take a reciprocal, right? So this becomes R equivalent is equal to 12 upon 7 ohms. This is the correct answer. If you do not complete this step, you will lose a lot of marks because this is not the complete answer. This is the reciprocal of equivalent resistance. One more step is there. Just take the reciprocal. That will give you the actual value for equivalent resistance. Next question. This is a case study. Now, imagine you are working in a lab and you are given all kinds of cool stuff to play with. You have iron nails, copper sulfate solution, barium chloride solution, copper powder, ferrous sulfate crystals, quicklime. So you have a lot of stuff you can work with. Now, we have to identify the chemical reactions for each of these cases. So the first case is barium chloride solution is mixed with copper sulfate solution and a white precipitate is observed. So this is a case where you are having substitutions, right? Barium chloride will react with copper sulfate. That will produce barium sulfate, which is a white precipitate, which is completely insoluble. So the moment this reaction happens, the barium sulfate will precipitate out of solution. That is the white precipitate you see here. The next reaction is on heating green colored ferrous sulfate crystals, a reddish brown solid is left and the smell of a gas having the odor of burning sulfur is observed. So what is happening here? The green colored ferrous sulfate crystals, if you are heating them, once you start heating them, these ferrous sulfate crystals have green color because the crystal contains water of hydration. Once you start heating the crystal, it will lose its water of hydration and it will become white. If you further heat this substance, if you further heat this anhydrous ferrous sulfate salt, what will happen is it will decompose into iron oxide. Iron oxide is the chemical which has this characteristic reddish brown color. And the other byproduct will be sulfur oxide gas, SO2, and that gas has the smell of burning sulfur. So the reaction here is a decomposition reaction. First, you are dehydrating ferrous sulfate by heating it. You are removing the water. On further heating, it is decomposing into iron oxide and sulfur dioxide gas, which is producing this characteristic smell. Next one, quicklime reacts vigorously with water, releasing a large amount of heat. So this is a very famous reaction. If you take quicklime, CaO, calcium oxide, and you mix it with water, it is a very aggressive, energetic reaction. The water will start boiling to a high temperature, and this will produce CaOH2, that is calcium hydroxide or slaked lime. Next, on heating copper powder in the air in a china dish, the surface of copper powder turns black. So if you are vigorously heating copper, copper is fairly unreactive at normal temperatures. If you heat it to a high temperature in powdered form, it will start reacting with atmospheric oxygen to produce copper oxide, which has a dark black color. So this is an oxidation reaction. Copper is reacting with atmospheric oxygen in order to produce copper oxide, which is black in color. The last option is an iron nail, when dipped in blue copper sulfate solution, becomes brownish in color and the color of copper sulfate starts to fade. Now, you know probably that copper sulfate has this beautiful dark blue color. If you put an iron nail inside it, what happens? Look at the reactivity series. We know that iron is more reactive than copper. So in a solution, iron will displace the copper out of solution. It will precipitate pure copper. So what you observe is you are getting a layer of brownish powdered copper on the iron material. And in turn, the iron is dissolving into the copper solution and going into solution. It is forming an iron sulfate solution. So the characteristic blue color of the copper is starting to fade. So you are seeing that here the iron is dissolving away into the copper sulfate and the color of copper sulfate is fading away. Next one, here is a slightly complex problem. If the hair color is governed by the capital and small b alleles, and there is this person Ria who has black hair color and her brother has brown hair color, but both parents have black hair, right? So Ria has black hair, her brother has brown hair, but both Ria and her brother's parents have black hair. Ria's husband has black hair, but his parents have black and brown hair color. So Ria's husband is also having black hair, but he has parents who have black and brown hair color. So based on this information, we have to figure out these questions. First question, from the above information, can you find the dominant and recessive hair color? So you are noticing here that Ria has black hair. Her parents both have black hair, but Ria's brother has brown hair, right? This tells us that you need only one gene to get the black hair color, but you need both genes if you want to get the brown color, because both of Ria's parents have the gene for brown hair even though they have black hair. So Ria's brother has inherited the recessive brown hair gene from both his father and his mother. That is why he has brown hair. This tells us that black hair is the dominant allele, brown hair is the recessive allele. This also tells us that Ria's brother has both the recessive alleles, small b, small b. On the other hand, what they have also asked here is, two children were born to Ria and had black and brown hair color respectively. What is the genotype of Ria's hair color? So Ria clearly has the potential to have brown-haired children. This can only happen if Ria herself carries a recessive gene for brown hair. Because let's say Ria did not have a recessive gene. In that case, both of her genes from both parents would be capital B, in which case it would be impossible for Ria to have any brown-haired children. So in this case, the genotype of Ria's hair color will be capital B, small b. Now, next question, are Ria's parents homozygous or heterozygous? Why? We notice here that even though Ria's parents both have black hair, written clearly, both her parents have black hair color, they have had two children with different hair color. So they have a daughter with black hair, they also have a son with brown hair. If both of Ria's parents were homozygous, then it would be capital B on the father's side, capital B on the mother's side. The children would not inherit brown hair at all, right? Because both Ria's parents have black hair. If they were homozygous, it would be only capital B. There is no small b in that case. So that makes it clear that Ria's parents are heterozygous. And the reason for that is that they have a child with brown hair. So both of them have to have the recessive brown hair allele. The last question, if Ria's brother marries a woman with BB hair color, so this is a heterozygous person, right? She carries the allele both for black hair and brown hair. What will be the possible hair color for the offspring? So we know that Ria's brother has brown hair, which means that he has small b genotype. He has inherited the recessive allele from both his parents. That is why he has brown hair. Now, the woman has capital B, small b hair. So the woman is clearly dark haired because capital B is dominant. But the children can inherit, if these two have children, Ria and this woman have children, sorry, Ria's brother and the woman have children, the children can inherit capital B from their father or small b from their father, and they will, they can inherit small b from their father, and they can inherit either capital B or small b from their father. So in one case, if the children are inheriting the capital B allele from their mother, they will be black haired. On the other hand, if Ria's brother and the woman have a child who inherits small b from the father and small b from the mother, they can also have brown hair, which means in this particular case, Ria's brother and the woman can have black haired or brown haired children. So in questions like these, it is very important to understand the mechanism by which a dominant or a recessive allele will work, right? So you have to consider various scenarios as to which allele will express itself in which combination. Otherwise, you can't track these questions. So practice is very necessary here. The next question, a rear view mirror is used in automobiles and other vehicles designed to allow the driver to see rearward. The rear view mirror is augmented by one or more side view mirrors, and they also have, in the modern devices, we also have rear looking video cameras, which have been built into many new models of cars. So these mirrors are placed flat against you. You are looking at them like this, and they are being used to see what is behind us. Now, based on this information, they have asked some questions. What are the questions? Based on the text of the data given above in the above paragraph, what kind of mirrors are used in rear view mirrors? State the reasons for the same. So if you think about it, this mirror is placed flat like this for you to look at. If you ever look in a mirror, you will notice two things. First of all, it does not matter if the object is far behind you or right next to you, right? The distance does not matter. You are always getting a virtual and erect image, regardless of distance. The second thing is that the image is always erect, and it doesn't matter how far or near the object is. It always looks small, right? You are able to see a large amount of the space behind you because the image is very small. So your field of view becomes big. You can see more of the world. All of these properties are only seen in convex mirrors. So for the first question, what type of mirror is being used for this purpose in rear view mirrors? The answer is a convex mirror. A convex mirror will give you a diminished image, first of all, so you can see more of the world behind you. It is always an erect image, which is what you want. You don't want an upside down image when you're looking in the rear view mirror. And it will always be a virtual image. You can't get it on a screen, no matter how far away or how near the image is from you. Now, what is the focal length of the mirror if the radius of curvature is 16 centimeters? Now, remember, the radius of curvature is the distance between the center of curvature and the pole of this mirror. So this is a convex mirror. Let's draw a simple diagram of this. So here you have the mirror, the convex mirror. This is the reflecting surface. So this will be the mirrored surface, and the bulged portion outward is the reflecting surface. Let's draw a principal axis here. This is our principal axis. For this case, for a convex mirror, we notice that the center of curvature is behind the mirror. So this is point C. Here is point C. And they are saying that the radius of curvature is 16 centimeters. So this will be the radius of curvature. This will be 16 centimeters. Now, what have they asked? What is the focal length of the above mirror if the radius is 16 centimeters? Remember, the focal length F is always equal to half the radius of curvature. So in this particular case, the center of curvature is 16 centimeters. The radius is half of this, that is 8 centimeters. Again, the point of focus will also be behind the convex mirror. Now, what are the 4 characteristics of the image formed by the above mirror? So the image formed by these mirrors is virtual. Doesn't matter what distance it is, you can't get this image on a screen. The image formed by these mirrors will be erect, irrespective of the distance from the object, no matter how far or near it is. The image will always be erect. It will always be virtual. It will always be diminished. It will be a diminished image because it is smaller than the actual world that you are seeing. That is why you are able to see more of the image in the mirror. And the field of view for this mirror will be large. The amount of space, the amount of region behind you that you can see will be larger for this type of mirror. Now, draw a ray diagram for a concave mirror of focal length 15 centimeters for the image formation of object distances 10 centimeters and 20 centimeters. Let's see how this is done. Okay. So here we have a concave mirror. This is a concave mirror. So this is the silvered surface. This is the inner reflecting surface. So the object will be placed somewhere here. Here we also have the principal axis of this mirror. So we measure all distances on this principal axis. And if you are drawing a ray diagram for this mirror, the focal length is 15 centimeters. So F is equal to 15 centimeters. The distance from the pole to the focus is 15 centimeters. So we are being asked what will be the image formation for distances 10 centimeters and 20 centimeters. So for this first case, the object is between the focus and the pole of this mirror. You will remember that if the object is closer to the mirror, the concave mirror, compared to the focus, you are going to get a virtual image. So in this particular case, if the object is here, let's say this is your object, the image formed will be virtual and it will be magnified on the other side of the mirror. So the rays will travel in such a way that they are diverging away from each other. So you are going to find that if you were to draw something like this, you're going to notice that these rays are diverging away from each other. If you produce them backwards, you will get a virtual image point. So you're going to get a magnified image, which is behind the mirror. So this is the virtual image. For the next case, we have an object at 20 centimeters. So the focal length is 15 centimeters. That means, so here, this is 15 centimeters. The center of curvature will be double the focal length, that is 30 centimeters. So the object is placed somewhere here. It is placed between the center of curvature and the focal length. So this is the object. For this particular case, you are going to have a magnified image, which is formed in front of the mirror. So it's a real image, and it will be inverted. So practicing the ray diagrams for these problems is very important. And you have to remember what are the various cases. If the object is closer than the focus, you are going to get an erect, magnified and virtual image. And for this particular case, between center of curvature and focus, you will get an inverted and magnified real image. Thank you. It was great interacting with all of you. I hope you have extracted a lot of value from this lesson.